All righty, everyone. Without further ado, fashionably late to our very own LinkedIn Live broadcast, the way we intended it, just like the record, Brad, you know?
Usually I'm to blame for any IT challenges, so everybody look at me as the common denominator.
There we go. Well, luckily we practiced this in dress rehearsal, so it's not like it's unusual for us to have this happen. We're just rocking and rolling.
Spot on.
Well, thanks everyone for joining today's call. We appreciate everybody tuning in on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on YouTube, and we're excited for you to be a part of this conversation. As always, my name is Mitch Benson, and I'm the Franchise Development Manager here at A Place at Home. And today I am joined by owner of A Place at Home, Kansas City South, Mr. Brad Haag. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for being here. And I tell you what, it's a long time no see, right? You were just here in Omaha, what, days ago?
I missed you so much. I had to join you in person again.
Yes, gosh, that's what I like to hear, right? But indeed, this we had you here in the office, right, with other trainees here in A Place at Home headquarters in Omaha, and it was just so much fun. It's a lot of information, right? There's a lot to go through, but
Oh, yeah.
indeed, it prepares us for that next step here. Are you getting excited?
Very excited. Yeah, let's do this thing, right?
Woo!
Dustin keeps asking me. My door's opening tomorrow.
Exactly. This guy over here is just like, he's got a client yet. He's looking over here, just like, is he gonna? Does he have a client? We'll get to it. You know.
Right.
But indeed, what we're excited to do today, right, is to kind of talk about the road that led us, right, to training week that will eventually lead us through successful businesses, helping folks in their own homes, right. And this journey that we all take is what is called at A Place at Home our care track. Right. And we here at headquarters thought it'd be really fun to take each piece of the journey we take with our franchisees and discuss them, right? One by one with different franchisees and different members of corporate, with folks who have recently gone through this stage of the process, right? And indeed, what we're looking at here so far is care track at A Place at Home begins with number one, Are You Care? The piece that we'll discuss today with Mr. Brad Haag. But we'll move from there into training week, the thing that Brad just, is very nearly completing, right? And that is our care launch phase, right? From there, we discuss care coaching. From there, we are at a stability point called We Are Care. And then we press forward to become care pros. It's an exciting journey, right? And every stage depends on the stage before it. But in my opinion, not just because this is the stage that I live in the most, but this very first one is the most important. in my view, this is something that could take as long as it takes, right? And is really, in many cases, lifelong dreams of individuals to become business owners, or something that happens very quickly. The uniqueness, the variety of what happens there is just so exciting. And Brad, I'm very I have a lot of respect for your story, for everything that you've done to get yourself to this position. And I thought the people would like to hear it today. And you've been so gracious with your time to talk to us a little bit about it. It's going to be great.
Oh, well, gracious. I don't know about that, but
no. Yeah. Well, as we start this, right, the process today, we're going to discuss the piece in our care track called Are You Care? And this is a vetting process, a two-way street from candidates looking at franchisors and franchisors looking at candidates to determine whether or not a franchisee relationship is in everyone's best interest, right? And so what I'm hoping to do here is to walk through your story, share with the folks on the call today what that looks like, and give them insight into what brought you to where you are today, right? But before you ever get in this conversation, right, with franchisors, we're in this phase that I refer to as the inquiry phase, right, which is like prehistoric times. It could pre-franchisor times, right, and it could be our entire lives, right, or at least a section of our professional background. Okay, Brad, this is where I'd like to start our story together, right? Brad, can you tell me a little bit about your professional background?
Sure. Yeah. So basically, sales and marketing has always been my career. I've spent the last 25 years in sales, marketing, leadership roles for major healthcare companies, both pharmaceutical and in the medical device space. I think what's unique about my career experience is with both opportunities, I had opportunities for business development where it was to create a sales force from the grassroots and grow that. So even though each company would have been a large corporation, I had the experience of as close to entrepreneurial experience as possible.
Mm.
And that's what I loved. We were able to establish the corporate culture the way we wanted to. We were able to grow the business. And it was something that I really, really cherished and, very fortunate to have that experience. Towards the end of that 25 years working with the company, I was in more of a role of, I was a contracting director for the medical device equipment. And it became, more about the negotiation for the goods that we were promoting, and everything was great. Loved it. I just missed the people aspect of it. And one of the things I missed was the patient care aspect. I had always had teams of nurses working with me, and then physicians as well. So the one thing I was missing was the people connection, the patient aspect of it. And a little bit more than a year ago, I made the choice to try and step away from that corporate role and into something a little bit more private, patient centric. And that was diving into the world of hospice.
Hmm.
And so I became the vice president of sales and marketing for a hospice company. And there I recognized the connection with the families, with the patients. And quite honestly, to be very honest, I was fearful at the beginning of that kind of connection because I'm a pretty sensitive guy. But I'm very excited about the opportunity to work with an independent company, even though they had national reach. It was privately owned, and I really thought this was going to be my opportunity to see if this is something personally that I could maybe do to create my own business. And I loved the patient experience. I saw opportunities within the business that I thought, I would do things differently just because of the culture that I grew up in. But what I really recognized was the opportunities for caregiving for even those patients that we had on hospice. So it really opened my eyes to the needs of senior care. And really, when it came time for me to look at doing something for myself, I didn't really dive into other business segments. I really looked into my experience came from healthcare. My experience came from working with people. My experience came with sales and marketing. And then my experience also was tied to clinical teams as well. So my focus in business opportunities was very, very narrow. I looked at caregiving, and the only thing I looked at outside of that was working with patented medical equipment to work with patients for pain relief. But really coming out of hospice, the caregiving was near and dear to me. I personally was going through experiences with family members that were needing that kind of caregiving, home health. And, we had a family member who really made a positive impact on our lives as we, had the experience of a caregiver working through with that family member all the way through hospice and then to her end of life. So it was something that I wasn't the guy that you mentioned before that looked into this forever. Once I recognized it, I kind of dove in.
Yeah, it's just, to me, diving in, still comes off of a unique perspective that you explored in your own career, right? I talked to a lot of folks too who said, well, I don't have a background in this, that's not my professional background. And indeed, that's most folks in this system here. But in your case too, you said, okay, I have an end goal in mind here. I'm going to explore another opportunity and see what that looks like, still in my professional career outside of entrepreneurship. And it shed light on what that could be like moving forward too.
No, you're exactly right.
Yeah. Which is, to me, such a unique perspective and such a great opportunity you earned for yourself to have that kind of flexibility to do it. But you also mentioned something that I love too. Like, there's so much professional background here that really kind of led you to maybe a narrow scope, but there was also that personal experience, right?
Yeah, and that's what, there's got to be some personal experience that kind of drives you to do what you do, right?
Right.
And for me, it's also about being a little bit self-aware. And so even though I could come up with the thought of, I could do this for myself, but I knew the skill sets that I have and the skill sets that I don't. And I couldn't do it all by myself. And that's where I thought, it will be with a franchise where I can rely upon the support and have somebody show me, what has been done successfully in order for me to be successful and to provide not only a good experience for the clients that we intend to work with, but also a good working environment for the people I hope to be working with.
Mhm. I love that. Right. Everything you mentioned so far is such an incredible, opportunity you bring to the table, something you get to eventually give to your clients and have that, sort of service with them. But to make it go, right, there are some other things you need to rely on, right? And there are any number of franchise brands excited to talk to you about that, right? And the phone just doesn't stop ringing for days, right? It's stuff like that. So at this time, right, you've kind of pivoted now and you've seen, okay, I know I could do this for myself. That end result is something I want to be a part of. I want to continue to give that to people. But there's some gaps in my experience that maybe I could rely on a franchisor to fill, and we can do this together, right? Uh,
Right.
at that time, right, we kind of move through an inquiry phase to a point where we start the process of what we call qualifying, right?
Mhm.
Uh, and this is kind of the what I'd like to ask is there's any number of brands all working with you, things like that. There's a lot of stuff to consider when you've made this choice now. When qualifying is not just me, the franchisor, qualifying somebody who wants to join. It's mostly you, the candidate, looking at all of us, out here talking to you. What steps did you take to help narrow the field for potential franchise partners?
Well, the steps, I mean, it was more for me about making the initial inquiries. And you can do that a number of ways. You can do that by, purposefully or accidentally hitting a button on an internet search looking for business ideas. Um, but really, once I started to see how I could gain information and then realize there are people to connect with, whether they be franchise consultants
Right.
or finding people that have been doing this and maybe stepped into a competitive company and reaching out, making phone calls. Um,
Mm,
the one thing I was leery of, it was making those inquiries, knowing that there's just going to be a flood of opportunities that come in on the email
yeah.
and the phone calls. And at first, I was really reluctant, didn't want that mass bombardment. But the
Mhm.
reality is, that's what got me here. It gave me the opportunity to kind of scroll through and pick and choose and answer the phone for somebody that I thought this could be somebody of value.
Mhm.
And so that was a franchise consultant. And I think I've shared the story with you before. The initial inquiry that connected me with that franchise consultant wasn't a place at home,
Mhm.
but she was interested in listening to what I had in mind, and she recognized that culture, support, and a high sense of regard for professionalism were very, very important to me.
Mhm.
And she even said, I may have a few more ideas with you. Can we reschedule another call? And this is where I found a place at home. What's interesting is I had already talked to you before she even came back to me with a place at home, and then that second conversation validated everything that I thought I might experience by continuing a conversation with you in a place at home. So
Mhm.
the research was trying to find people that were doing something similar,
Yeah.
but then also being willing to take information and solicitation calls to find somebody that may just be that gem.
Mhm. Mhm. I'm so glad that you invested yourself in that way, because it is a lot. There's a lot of folks to do that. Once you enter the arena, there's a lot of people interested in speaking with you, uh, and some of those folks are high powered, that can help you review multiple brands like franchise consultants. Some folks are the brands themselves who are actively working there and can help you kind of sift through some of that stuff, right? But ultimately, the reality, like you say, it's people breaking through, proving to you there's value in the next conversation, and saying, hey, if we continue this process, you're going to get something out of this, right? And then it's all hunky dory, right? It's feeling good, it's nice, we've made this connection with somebody, and then the next call is with a brand, and they say, here's my FDD, read all of it, right, and sign it later, we'll talk to you. And then it's work, right? After you've gotten all of these salespeople, you have to actually listen to their pitches. Oh my gosh.
No, it's true, and that's a great point. But before I even got that FDD, I felt like there was enough communication back and forth and enough information about a place at home that I could do some due diligence prior to the FDD. So I didn't feel like I was slapped with an FDD without having the opportunity to talk to people.
Yeah.
And that was really important to me, because it's again about the culture and the people for me. And when there was the ability to quickly connect to somebody, and they may not know me, they may just know I'm somebody looking at investing money. But I didn't feel like I was slammed with all the paperwork.
Mm-hmm. That's excellent to hear, right? Because not only in senior care, I imagine for many industries, right? What you will ultimately do as a franchisee is create a relationship with somebody who needs your help, right? That's what the process ends with. And I would argue that any business is similar in that way, but what we get to do is so personal, is so relationship based,
Mhm.
that where our team is trained and our leaders train me essentially, that says, hey, if that's what we're asking them to do at the end, that's what you need to do at the beginning, right? Is give that person that sense that this is a relationship, and we're going to get to know each other, and we're going to get to this point where there is a lot to go through, there's a lot happening here, but if we find enough value in each other, ideally we can step through it in a comfortable way, get to see these things, and oh, by the way, there's all this other information out there that you can review about this brand along the way, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And that's the impression, and that's the feeling I got. And I didn't feel like some of the other companies that I talked to, I was just going to be investing and then receiving a notebook saying, here's how we did it. I knew that the people at a place at home were going to be a part of that.
Mm-hmm. I love that, right? Here's the playbook. See you at convention. Good luck. If folks want that, there's definitely opportunities for it.
There are plenty of them out there for you.
It's certainly there, right? But one thing that always comes up to me in these processes, like right here, right? This is what in our process we describe as the explore phase. Right, we're really looking under the hood. We're getting into agreements, into territory structure, into how this business works, things like that, right? And at this time, most franchisors are going to start asking questions about, hey, does your spouse know about this? Right? Are they going to be involved? Do you have a business partner? I'm talking to you, but is somebody going to get surprised by this later on? Maybe we have a chance to speak with them, right? Brad, can I ask, as you're looking under the hood of this business and wrapping your head around it, what were the conversations like with your spouse? How did you communicate with her about that?
Oh, well, in our household, it was definitely a lot of conversations. At the time, going through just to determine, if I'm unhappy with where I am at this point, am I just going to look for another corporate job, or are we going to try and do something for ourselves? And so it was definitely a very strong line of communication as we vetted the different opportunities. There's a lot of investment that comes in with this, right? And my wife nor myself have ever been accused of being very risky with any financial endeavors. So no, there was a lot of conversation, and discussing what can be done, what can be financially supported, and then what would be the expected outcomes at certain timelines. And so we talked about that, but probably had more robust conversations leading down through the discovery process as I worked with other branch owners in the validation process. But no, from the very get-go, she was included. And even knowing that she wasn't going to be an active partner in the business, she is a vested partner. And she, you met with her, Dustin met with her, Jared met with her.
Mm-hmm.
So, That wasn't like trying to sneak in a golf bag purchase or any sort of anything.
Exactly. You just put the guitar under the bed and hope she doesn't look there. Like, not quite. It's not quite like that, right?
What do you
But
mean you saw an investment on our Amazon bill?
yeah, exactly. We didn't talk about this. How? What is this investment? Oh my gosh, you know. Well, and I find that everybody knows the importance of this conversation, right? It makes sense. It's good. It's good advice that, especially with considered purchases, everybody in your household needs to be consulted. But I like how you mentioned too that, when you're having this conversation, you start at the point of your career, like, this is where I'm headed, this is what I'm unhappy with what I'm doing before, and here are a slate of options that could serve as a solution, right? And when you have that conversation with your spouse about multiple avenues you could take, you find that it's just a level-headed way to understand what decisions you could make, gain buy-in from people around you, from your loved ones, and then use each avenue to get more information from them, right? What can you tell me? What can I learn about this? How certain can we be about the risk of entrepreneurship or going back to corporate America or whatever it might be, right? And those conversations end up developing such a solid foundation of support and trust, because our spouses, though they may not be time involved in the business, they're involved in the business.
Yeah.
Like
Oh,
you
yeah.
mentioned. Yeah. And when you talk to brands, we can always, share with you what those conversations could sound like, things to think of, all of this stuff, right? But there comes a time where, the salesman just has to step aside, and we have to say, Brad, it's time for you to speak with our franchisees, right? Who had these same conversations that you're having, right? With your career, with what you want to do, with what you want to build. They sat where you sat. They talked to me, bless them, and got through it, and finally had this chance to say yes and create this business. This is the third stage of our discovery process, the franchisee validation process. So, Brad, tell me, how did you prepare to speak with these franchise owners?
Well, first of all, working with you and the team to schedule opportunities to discuss with them. I think my first engagement was with Dina, then I met with Natalie, then Chris and Rick, and then Britt. And how I prepared was making a list of all the questions that I would want to ask, and that I would want somebody to answer besides you or the corporate team, right?
Right,
So I made
right.
this long list of questions, but I really always just wanted to start out with, tell me how you got involved in this. And what I loved about it was each person's story was different. Each reason they found their way into a place at home was different circumstances. Each one had different struggles out of the gates, but each one boasted the support that the corporate office had, and that was really important to me. But it also provided me the opportunity. You're talking about that everlasting, the Moby Dick document of the FAQ and even the FA, and it gave me the opportunity to say, okay, so I see a couple things in here. What was your first impression? How did you react, and how do you work with that? And it really helped me to understand, the things in there that I didn't truly understand. So I got a lot of good insights. What I got was more of an understanding that this is a very tight corporate culture, well supported, and that's what I was looking for. That's what was really important to me. So the validation calls fed me with a lot of information, but how I prepared was just making sure I was asking the questions that could kind of peel that information out of them.
Mm-hmm. And I'm just so impressed by that preparation you did, right? This is such a unique moment of franchising, right? And not to say that you can't just, cowboy the call and walk in and just say, tell me about your life story. I guess you could. But, the person on the other end of the phone runs a business, is excited to speak with you, to have this opportunity to get to the heart of what's pressing in your world and give you their insight. And I think you took full advantage of that and rose to the occasion and said, look, I do have some things I'm interested in that I want you to uniquely answer, as opposed to these sales guys with their scripts, right? And get them out of it for a little while. And I want to kind of talk about them, that kind of thing, right?
Yeah, yeah. Enough
get that
about
feedback. Yeah,
Mitch.
enough about this guy over here, right? Have you talked to him since? Oh my gosh, that kind of thing, right? It's important to know, and that kind of opportunity is so important. And there's an unending amount of literature and advice and writings and videos about how to validate with franchisees all over the internet. There's a million ways to do it. But Brad, when you were kind of talking to me earlier, there was one thing that I heard that really struck a chord with me, is that you had seen so much variety through franchisees that you spoke to, yet you saw a little bit of yourself in every one of them, right?
Oh yeah, no, like I
Yeah,
said, each story was different, each set of circumstances, but I could relate to each and every one of them. And so, what my takeaway was that we all have a different story. I could take all the information I gained from each one of the four and make it my own. But
yeah.
no, it's we're all different, but we're all the same.
Yeah, yeah. And then, when that lines up that way, I think that you get a sense as a candidate looking at this brand that, okay, this is the kind of team that I'm supporting, developing my business in my territory, but these are
Mhm.
the folks also supporting me, right? All this variety I see from them, yet we have a similar through line. We have, a collective motivation to help our aging population, right? And that just makes so much sense. And that would be essentially my key takeaways to anybody listening to the call here. Look through all the information on how to prepare to speak with franchisees, but look for the variety and the through line. Does that match with you? And if it does, you could be somebody just like Brad who is seeing that from these phone calls,
Right. And you're able to ask the questions that may be your roadblocks. I mean, for me,
Yeah,
that was, gosh, how do you ramp up with staffing at this
yeah,
time? How did you manage to be so patient with the licensing process? Things like that. What could you do to stay busy? What could you do as you're ramping up? So there were so many questions, and you make a good point, Mitch. They're all busy. They're running their business, but they took the time to help me in my discovery process, and it was more than the validation that I needed. If I asked the right
hmm
question.
hmm 100%. I love that, and oftentimes how this essentially is designed is to get that kind of I don't know, 90% certainty, set in your mind as a candidate looking at a brand. You've had all this foundational conversations with the team itself, got a chance to step away from them and ask the real people doing it, hey, is this for real? I have specific questions I want to know from you, Mr. and Mrs. Franchisee. And then if you get there, it's time to potentially, meet the team, right? A million words for this. A place at home chooses discovery day, right?
Mhm.
This is where we kind of wrap up your discovery process in a single day in person, in a way to present to you what it's going to be like to launch this business, right? So Brad, tell me a little bit about your discovery day. How important was it for you in the world of virtual? I know you and I are talking virtually right now, right?
Right.
But we saw each other in person here at the Omaha headquarters. How important or unimportant was that to you?
For me personally, is very, very important. I'm a people person, so I'd rather be having the face-to-face conversations. I mean, in healthcare, gosh, everybody went virtual during COVID, and
Yeah.
we've been doing that as a corporation for years and years. But to me, it's about the in-person interaction, which also leads us way to caregiving, right?
Yeah.
So even though I only live 3 hours away from Omaha, and it was an easy drive for me, even if we were clear across the country from one another, I still would have made it mandatory for myself to sit down, meet with you all, just to validate all the expectations that I had, accumulated over the previous 2 months. So, I love the setup. And if there was an opportunity for somebody to do the discovery virtually, other people may have been fine with it. For me personally, I appreciated the personal attention and being able to walk in and see everything, understand, meet the people in person, go out to a particular branch site, meet their
Mhm.
people, talk about their experiences. So for me, the discovery day was absolutely essential in making the determination.
Yep. And I want to shout out some of those folks who made that day happen, right?
Please.
Primarily, our Omaha office staff, right?
Yep.
Rick and Chris Perkins run the location here in Omaha, and they are just overwhelmingly gracious with their time, with their office staff's time, for folks coming in to review this business on their discovery days. And it was a unique opportunity specifically for me because we've always designed that to be kind of a validation call. Right, we hop in the car, we drive down, we pick up coffee, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and when we get rocking, right? Well, essentially, it's like, okay, cool. This is your time to have, some one-on-one stuff with this. And the office staff and Brad look at me and they said, "No, man, come in the conversation. Get over here. We're not just going to leave you out in the waiting room." And I'm like, well, that's typically what I do. So we got a great chance to speak together about what it's like, for folks running the business as office staff members, right? And they're just unendingly gracious with their time, with their knowledge and experience. I can't thank all of those folks enough for, rising to the occasion. Brad says, "Hey, I'm going to come to Omaha," and everybody says, "Great. We're going to see you, and it's going to be a good time. Let's talk about this business together," right? Yeah. And, it's all of these kind of moments in between too, where, you go to dinner and learn that, Jared and Amy know family of yours.
Really? I got to tell you, that was very significant to me. Was
Yeah.
again, part of the journey for me is meeting all the folks, but then having the opportunity to meet the families behind the corporate office. That's very valuable to me. So
Mhm.
I appreciated everybody's participation, and it made me feel like I was stepping into the right culture and going to be a part of that culture.
Mhm. Mhm. 100%. And Brad, it's just so much fun to spend this time with you, in these days. It's just as important to us, right? Again, it's the same sort of tone that you're going to be delivering to your clients themselves, is in person, friendly and compassionate. And that's something that we work our best to infuse in the process, so that at each turn you're like, what, this is exactly it, so that we can come to discovery day. We can, work toward a moment where we get to start training, right, and get into the business and rock and roll, right? And this period was what, like over Thanksgiving, as we were kind of making that transition. It's about that time. Yeah. And
It moved
yeah.
quickly, and that's one thing I appreciated with the place at home. I mean, I've never been accused of being patient either, so I was looking for a pretty expedited timeline, and a place at home was flexible. I never felt like I was being pushed, and I never felt like I was being pushed back. So
Mhm.
no, it was. I think everybody's going to work on their own, they're different timelines, but
Yeah.
ours moved pretty quickly, and it still isn't quickly enough for me.
Exactly. Brad, you're an inspiration. The clip that you move at is lightning fast, in the fast lane. I haven't driven with you yet. You've ridden in my car, but I wonder what that's like.
No, no, you'd be safe. I'm not fast with everything.
You're right.
I'm
They've
just
never
gonna
caught
take.
me. So, but Brad, as we wrap up the conversation today, and before I let you go here, we've talked about so much. Any parting advice you might give to someone who might start this journey, and what they should be looking out for? Any words of wisdom for it?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I think certainly with the phase of doing like the research,
Yep.
like I said, be willing to talk to people, to accept some of the bombardments of solicitations, to allow yourself to pick through it. But the reality is, you can find people willing to talk to you, even if you don't know them. Somebody knows somebody that's worked for a company like this,
Hmm.
or maybe owned a competitive company, and people are willing to talk. And just do a little bit of networking just to see what others' experiences are out there, and then gauge it upon the people that you're put in touch with here. And
Hmm.
that's what did it for me.
Huge piece of advice, right? Commit to yourself. You've made this investment. You've earned the right to explore what opportunities look like for you, for your family, for your community, and just take advantage of that. Get in there, get in the arena, get your phone blown up by a million guys like me. Pick one of them you like and start talking to them, because it could lead to a situation where you're excited about a business you get to build, about the impact you're about to make, and get excited to go through a discovery process like this. And for everyone watching, several of these throughout the month of April, you'll learn what it's like for franchisees to get through this space where Brad and I live right now, into the training period where Brad is just about to finish, right? Into initial coaching and how the business is getting off the ground, that level where we're at stability in what we call We Are Care, and then stratospheric success, right, in Care Pro status, right? And that is where we're going to head in this next week, everybody. Tune in for a great conversation with our finance and operations support specialist. That's Danny Sloan, and she'll be talking to our owner of a place at home, Pueblo, Colorado, Bambi Creek, about the second phase of Care Track called Care Launch. Be very exciting to learn about how this business gets put together from the people who put it together, right? and recently got that done. We're excited to see you next week. But Brad, I must thank you again. Thank you so much for your time here this afternoon. It's a pleasure talking to you.
No, thanks for allowing me to participate. I enjoyed it.
Excellent. All righty, go Brad, go. We're excited to see you start. Dustin's still asking if you got a client yet,
I had one, but I had to take this call. So go
Come
back
on.
and say,
Fine. All right.
we are just waiting on the state license to open the doors, and then we are off and running. So
there we go. Go Kansas, go. Let's do it.
That's right.
Brad, thank you again. Have a great rest of your day, and until next time.
Thank you very much. Have a good day, everybody.
See ya.